Well, here at 41 Action News, after months of stay-at-home orders and uncertainty, we know that it is going to be a long road to the rebound, to the recovery that we know Kansas City will see. And I'm so happy you're all joining us. My name is Dia Wall. We'll have to restart the city at some point, but how do we do it safely? How do we do it responsibly? And what will our communities look like on the other side of this? So to help, we've got a panel of fantastic experts from across the Kansas City metro to talk with us virtually about everything from education to business to healthcare and public policy, including Greater Kansas City President and CEO Joe Reardon, Kansas City, Missouri Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Mark Bedell, the President of ALTCAP, Ruben Alonzo III, University of Kansas Health System infectious disease expert, Dr. Dana Hawkinson, and UMKC Innovation Center Executive Director Maria Myers, along with University of Kansas School of Public Affairs and Administration Professor Hannes Zacharias. Welcome, everybody. So the first question that I would like to open up with is about opening up, and I'm going to start with Dr. Hawkinson. What is the status of coronavirus in our community right now? And there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of interest in beginning to reopen our cities and our economies. What does that look like, and how can we do that safely?
Yeah, I think certainly in discussions with other hospitals around the area, our amount of hospitalized patients is pretty flat. But as we are rolling out more testing throughout the area, throughout the city, on both sides of the state line, we are seeing more and more cases. So there are definitely more infections that we're diagnosing. So far, like I said, the hospitalized patients remain flat, but that could turn very quickly if we are able to open up and people have more contact. What we are seeing now as far as number of infections is probably related to what we have been doing the last 3 weeks or 4 weeks with the stay-at-home orders. So we know that the way and the clinical efficiency with which this virus spreads from person to person, it will be very easy to have new cases and a lot of new cases. However, we wouldn't really see those for another 7 days, 10 days, 2 weeks or more before we really understand the full impact of reopening when we are able to reopen.
One of the first impacts that we saw was on schools. Schools were one of the first things to close. So I'm going to direct this question to Dr. Bedell with KCPS. How are you prioritizing meeting the educational needs of your students, along with all of the other needs that maybe a lot of people didn't realize were met through the academic process?
Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of needs in three tiers that we look at: the social, emotional, and academic growth of our students. All three of those are being impacted right now as a result of COVID-19. What it also has done is it further revealed a lot of what I had been talking about around the inequities that exist in this city. I talked a lot about economic development, east the truth, opportunities for people in their own communities to earn livable wages, the food deserts, the mobility and the evictions and all of those things is hitting us hard right now, because it's clear that from a Wi-Fi and connectivity standpoint, a number of those families east of Truce cannot access what the district has built right now. And we're not immune to this. There's a number of other urban school districts, because I'm on the phone calls with members of the Council for Great City Schools that's trying to deal with the exact same things that we're dealing with right now. How do you address the inequities? You can't educate and introduce new concepts when everybody does not have connectivity. So the school district focus has been solely on review, just as many of our other school districts are doing. The Commissioner of Education here from Dr. Margie Van Dieven has made it very clear that the expectation is that you focus on review and you can move on if you know 100% everybody has the opportunity to access the new curriculum. And it's a part of the reason why they waived the assessments and every other requirement, in particular for seniors. And it's also a reason why students are being held harmless. At the end of that third quarter, the only thing that can happen now is we help you improve, but you cannot go down. Your grades cannot be lowered as a result. And that's a practice that's happening across the state of Missouri. So what are we doing right now? We're working from a social and emotional standpoint. We just got a grant to be able to provide telehealth services to our students. We just signed some MOUs to have some access to some radio stations so we can set up hotlines and we can do some lectures and things of that nature, and people can call in when they need support, in particular with some of that social and emotional distress. We're working on a number of stations to try to be able to provide academic content, because we think this is going to be longer than what's expected. And if there's another shutdown later on in the fall, we need to be prepared to be strong virtually as an educational entity. And that means having educational access stations that are public and then even on cable. So because we have different providers that we can provide content and things of that nature on those stations. And so the last piece I'll share with you all is just around the work we're doing to address the digital divide. Last week, we piloted 3 to 4 school buses in the middle of Wi-Fi deserts. We have internet access because our new fleet of buses already came equipped with Wi-Fi. And so we parked those in the areas where we feel like there's a lot of mobility, because in some areas where there's high mobility, hotspots are going to be neutralized. They're not going to be any good because people continue to move, and then those hotspots will not benefit us. But if we got school buses that are equipped that we can put there from 8:45 until 3 o'clock during those instructional hours, then we have an opportunity to reach our families up to 300 feet. So that's what we learned last week. So we're working now with other folks, Tom Esselman and Katie Booty. There's a group of people that we've been talking to address this digital divide piece. And we trying to now strategically figure out where do we want to station these buses. We just got 1,000 hotspots that came in last week. And so what's getting ready to go out to our families, you're not going to be able to see this, but we're going to have these mailers that will go out. And it's basically, do you need high Wi-Fi hotspots? People will be able to call us or enroll online, and then it will give them, here's the distribution schedule. So all of this will go on our website. All of our schools will start to give out those devices next week. And here's the schedule as to what schools and what day they will be doing that. They can come and pick up their devices. And then also, if they need hotspot access, we will be able to provide that for them. So that's what the district's doing. And then we'll be ready, because summer school's going to have to be virtual this year. So it's a great opportunity to kind of pilot what we're doing right now, and then be ready to launch summer school June 1st through the 26th in a virtual manner. So that's what we're doing right now. And it's hard, y'all. It's really hard. But I'm very proud of the things that we're putting together. You all can go to our website and look at our digital curriculum that's up. It's pretty impressive. We got some pretty strong people here doing some great things.
Thanks, Dr. Bedell. You started, though, by talking about economic development. I'm going to direct my next question to Ms. Myers. Economic development normally isn't a fast process, at least from my experience covering it. So how do we make those strategic, calculated decisions on things that are going to benefit us right now, but also in the future from a development standpoint?
One of the ways that you can support economic development is by listening to the economy. And that's what's been happening quite a bit over the last 6 weeks as this change has come through. Really listening to our small businesses and understanding where their issues are and reacting to those issues. We've seen a tremendous response from our local, our state, and our federal governments in trying to support the issues that we're seeing. I work primarily with small businesses, and at first it was, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Everything's getting shut down. It moved quickly into, I need help with sales, I'm worried about my revenue, and then more so into, I need to worry about my employees. And we've seen stimulus packages and other things come through to help with the financing side. But we're now hearing with our small businesses is, how do I open safely? Once again, they're very concerned about their employees and their customers. So how do we reopen, and what do I need to have in play to open up? So the response to economic development in this situation has had to be very rapid, very quick, and it's an ever-changing game. So in the terms of looking back for over 5 years and seen what you've accomplished. Now we look back over 6 weeks and see what's changed and what we've tried to accomplish. And we have another panelist here, Ruben Alonso from AltCap, who can talk about some of the things that they have done to respond quickly to this crisis as well.
Mr. Alonso, why don't you share some of those resources? Because there was some challenge with the small business relief loan program. The money dried up really fast. Congress just approved another injection into that program. But in addition to that, are there other resources available for our small businesses?
Yeah, there are. And, AltCap, we recognized early on with some of our community partners, including the Chamber, Coffin Foundation, Civic Council, KCADC, and Port KC, that there was going to need to be, some local funding mobilized to get to those small businesses here locally that needed that financial, lifeline. And that's what we've been, focusing on in the immediate right now, is still working with those businesses, viable businesses just a month ago or, a month and a half ago, but are just really feeling the strain of this shutdown. And we're trying to, keep them afloat, help them weather this storm. The second phase will be to see how we can help them bounce back. But right now, there's still just a lot of small businesses out there that continue to just try to figure out how to kind of stay afloat here until this shutdown is over. But we put together a small business relief loan fund with some of those partners that I mentioned. We're able to get funds out, but that's a $5 million fund that we were able to to put together. We had over 600 loan requests for over $30 million within 72 hours of launching that 3 weeks ago. So we've been able to put out close to $1 million in relief loan funds, average size probably about $25,000. So very different than the federal response and through PPP, which that's been great, but it's not really getting to the small businesses that we see need those funds. And at AltCap, we've been very focused on trying to get capital to businesses that have historically had challenges accessing capital, specifically minority-owned businesses. That was the case in good times. This crisis only exacerbated that. So Dr. Bedell talked about the digital divide. There's definitely a capital divide here too between within the small business community.
Okay, we got to go to Mr. Reardon now with the Chamber. And we have already, in a matter of weeks, heard that some Kansas City staples, Beignet down in River Market is closed, Nick and Jake's on the Plaza, Webster House downtown, permanently closing. Is there anything that we can do as a community, as the people watching at home, to support the businesses we love and keep them afloat so they can weather this?
There's a lot of struggling with small businesses. There's no doubt about it. And as Ruben mentioned, all of this, the occasions that are going on with small business and what they're confronted with is of no fault of their own, right? So anything we can do to help keep a small business intact is just absolutely critically important. That includes everything from something individuals can do. So, if we love a restaurant and they're offering carry out, to take advantage of that and support them, all the way up to the need for the federal government to continue to put dollars out into the marketplace to support small business and keep people employed. So this next round of stimulus that's going through the House process right now is extremely important because the number of dollars in the first round was not adequate to address the needs. And the faster we can get to that, the better off all of our small businesses will be. And I do want to say, I want to give a lot of credit to the banks in Kansas City, because if you look at the stats in the first round on a per capita basis, Kansas ranked 9th in the amount of dollars that they were able to draw down through the PPP program, and Missouri ranked 10th. And so we're Kansas City. We know how to get together. We know how to collaborate. We know how to lift one another up. And there's evidence of that even in the midst of the crisis that we're dealing with. That has to continue. We have to empower organizations like Ruben's at AltCap and others to have access to those small business dollars at the federal level, because they are the ones that can interact with businesses that don't have a banking relationship. So next rounds of stimulus need to be available to those institutions that have connections to small businesses that don't have banking relationships, many of them minority, many of them in areas of economic distress. That has to happen. So we've got to lift up at every single level, and that personal commitment that we can make in the current crisis to try to lift up a business can make all the difference in the world as so many people are struggling.
I'm going to point this next question to Dr. Hawkinson. We know that your expertise is infectious disease, but we also know that you don't work in a vacuum. There's a lot of pressure to open up the economy, right? To get people back out. And quickly, this has become an either or, right? We're either trying to serve health and safety in the community, or we're trying to serve our economy and the business community. Mm-hmm. But these things can coexist simultaneously. So my question would be, independently of all of that, what are the 2 or 3 things that you, as an expert in this field, really need to see to tell us that it's okay to start relaxing?
Yeah, I mean, the answer to all of those questions is yes. The answer to everybody wanting and needing to get back to work and thrive is yes. And again, we know that there are disparities in economics and health without this, but certainly they have been expanded and further greater now that we have. And this happens with any man-made disaster or natural event. Certainly now it is. And so we need to get back to work. We need our economies to thrive. We need our kids to be getting the school lunches that they get for their meals. How do we do that? We don't know the exact answer moving forward. We are trying to use anything from mathematical models and projections to do that. Again, we know it all starts with the virus. We know this virus spreads very efficiently. We know that for the most part, people are not going to be too ill and going to be able to stay at home, over 80%. We know that the kids, who are generally our most vulnerable population, are relatively spared, but yet they can spread the disease to other loved ones, especially the older loved ones that we have. So how do we go about getting people to do what they need to do to get back to school, to get to work, to earn a living? It's really hard. Again, we can use the projections, but we have to look at the exact data from day to day to see how many infections we're having, how many hospitalizations are we having. We need to make sure that when those infections come, and that small percentage of people who are hospitalized and who have critical illness, although it could be a very large number, but because we know so many people can be infected, don't overwhelm our healthcare system and our PPE supply and our testing supply, and even our drugs to keep you comfortable and safe while you're on the ventilator. And we know those can be issues. So there's no good answer. It is a day-to-day equation that you have to look at, the numbers, the data that you have to look at, and you have to weigh everything. And it has to be our leaders, our politicians, in coordination with our public health experts to really try and determine the best way to do about that. And once we are able to do that, it's important to note that it is going to be down to everybody's personal responsibility to do the things that we had talked about in the past. Number 1, don't go out if you're sick. Number 2, wash your hands frequently. Don't touch your face. If you do have a cough or sneeze, do that into your elbow or into your shirt. So it's going to take a combination of all of those things. Our political leaders, our public health leaders, and as individuals as well.
Hannes, I've got a big one for you. We've talked about all of the variety of impact, but this does affect us at the local, state, and federal level from a civic perspective, in addition to the social aspect that I think a lot of people are feeling the pinch of as well. What steps can we start taking now to shore us up no matter how long this lasts?
Well, I think, first of all, following the advice of Dr. Hawkins is certainly appropriate. I think public policy is really kind of going through some significant changes right now, and you're seeing the struggles and the thought processes in the region trying to advance the ball. And I think in 3 big buckets. First of all, in the immediate activity, I think public policymakers are wrestling with a dynamic between public health and economic vitality, and how to go and meld those things together is really the immediate concern. But I think soon we'll be transitioning to the next phase, where he talks about what does the region look like in the next 2 years. And I say 2 years because I think that is the time between now and when a vaccine really is available and widely distributed in the population. So what's the public policy in terms of mask distribution and production? What about social distancing as we go into month 8 or 7 in this activity? What do we do about crowd size and crowd control have to be debated and so forth. And one of the big issues I think that's there, and Dr. Bedell talked about it, is the idea of this digital divide. I think the world has changed dramatically. We are going to be basically in a post-COVID environment, which says basically we're going to be doing services, work, and education from home. But that really kind of talked about the large inability for many parts of our community to not have access to high-speed internet. So what's the public policy about providing high-speed internet? We have folks in the southwest part of Johnson County and in the areas of Gardner and Edgerton, that area, that do not have high-speed internet. How do we measure the divides along with the 18th Street and Vine activity? And can we find pathways to get investments to go ahead and provide the conduits that allow that to occur will be part of the public discussion. Beyond that point is, what does the world look like beyond 2 years? And again, the idea of how do we deliver goods and services in a public environment? How do we go ahead and provide the services for mental health and public health and all the various services? And how do we facilitate kind of that change of work patterns, accounting services being delivered by high-speed internet, those sort of activities. So policymakers, I think, are really ramping up the thinking to kind of handle those three areas. And I think there are three distinct buckets. The immediate fire, if you will, about COVID-19, what's going to happen in the next 2 years, and what's going to happen that area beyond. And I think we have to bring together great thoughtful people in the region to visualize that future, articulate what the deficiencies are, and provide game plan about what investments we should make, both in human capital and physical infrastructure, to mitigate the next future.
Hannes, I'm going to stick with you. On the heels of that, how do we make sure that these programs and the policies are working as they are advertised and designed to?
Well, I think that's going to take a lot of monitoring and a lot of thought process. I advocate, and Joe's been very good at those activities as well, trying to bring together thought leaders on the region, really talk about that, as opposed to the idea of every small entity pulling. I mean, you look at the coronavirus relief funding package that was passed a few weeks ago, $2 trillion. I don't know what $2 trillion looks like, but it's a lot of money coming to the region ostensibly. So how do we plan for that? And how do we go ahead and leverage those dollars that advances the region for the new world? And let's not be afraid of it. I think there is a really, as we talk about, let's not have a good crisis kind of be averted for what the future is going to be. It's a different world. So let's embrace it. Let's go ahead and talk about it. Let's visualize it and start rolling up our sleeves and work on it with the resources we have. We know that Johnson County and Jackson County will get something or have access right now to about $230 million, and there might be even more dollars come available for the region. How do we manage those dollars, leverage those dollars for the great benefit of our community, both public and private?
I thought you were going to say good journalism.
Well, journalism is part of that, Dia, no question about it. An educated population is fundamental to how we handle the region, and you guys are doing a great job that way.
You know, Ruben, I want to turn to you because, to Hannes's point, it is a different world. And I know for a lot of the businesses, small businesses especially, in communities that are struggling, right? Communities that have high populations of people of color and low income customer bases. How are you advising them? Because this has been a rapid shift.
Yeah. You know, it's been a challenge to reach as many of the small businesses as need our assistance. But you know, that comes with, I think, just the challenge of just having such a large city. One you know effect of this, I think, is just seeing kind of the hyper focus that a lot of the stakeholders have been able to bring to this effort with our relief loan fund. And you know, and financial assistance is not the only thing. You know, we need to do a lot more to help bring more parts of our community, more small businesses into the fold to participate in a thriving you know, economy, local economy. And that's where we're trying to do that as much as we can. But I think that goes back to you know, the overall kind of public policy approach that we have to economic development, and how we're again making these policy decisions that allow again certain parts of our community that just have historically not been able to access capital or just access opportunities, you know, generate wealth, you know, in their community. We need to approach economic development, I think, very differently going forward. And I think that's where, you know, capital does play a part, but I think also the things that, you know, Maria's doing at KC SourceLink in terms of providing that technical assistance or those business development services to help a lot of these small businesses, you know, grow and develop. That's going to be critical too. But we've got to have kind of the public policy behind that, the focus on small businesses. I mean, you look at the unemployment rate. I mean, a lot of that's coming from a lot of these kind of Main Street retail small businesses. I mean, that's the impact that, you know, that has on the community in terms of those lost jobs. Not to mention just the lost goods and services that you know that occur when these small businesses, you know, have to shut down or go out of business.
Ms. Myers, what is the impact? How significant is the impact of the lost revenue right now economically?
Well, it's jobs and revenue, right? We know that 58% of our net new jobs in the Kansas City region are coming from these small businesses that we're talking about.
Mhm.
So it's a phenomenal impact when they're no longer providing those jobs. And as their revenues dry and the jobs are no longer provided, it's a significant part of our economy that is getting impacted at the moment because of the number of jobs that our small businesses have. That's why it's very important to try to keep these businesses intact as we go through this and help them keep those jobs in the marketplace, because they are the job creators of our communities.
Dia, can I add to that? I think, if I may.
Yes, absolutely.
I think good point. Maria brings up a very good point, and I think that's one area that we need to focus on: is what are the new jobs in this changing economy, and what sort of workforce development do we need to provide for the skill building for those who are going to be unsettled, I guess, upset by this sea change going forward. And I think that's what we need to think about as well. How do we train people? How do we articulate the next economy? And how do we give those individuals the skills to survive in the small business environment that is certainly going to change with regards to this connectivity and work from home situation?
Joe, in January, the Chamber released its 2020 Outlook. How much has that changed, and how much do you anticipate it will continue to change even 6 months, a year from now?
Well, the world has changed fundamentally. We all know that, and that's happened here in Kansas City as well. But to feed off of what Hannes just mentioned, I think that we also have to be forward thinking in what was going on prior to the virus, and what might be accelerated as a result of that. So retail, it was having fundamental changes in it before the virus relative to how we consume. I would anticipate that will accelerate, and the idea that people will be consuming more through the internet and having things delivered to them at home is likely to increase. If you look at Kansas City from a strategic standpoint, being in the middle of the country has always been advantageous to us. And from a logistics delivery standpoint, I think it's an area where you could see Kansas City being more and more prevalent in the conversations about how you deliver from a logistics standpoint, a whole suite of goods throughout the country. So I think there's things that have always been fundamental in our past that now can become even more important than they have been in the near last period of time. I think that's really critical. The second thing I think I would mention, reflecting on a lot of what I've heard, is as we get back to work and as dollars come from the federal government, all of us know this virus knows no jurisdictional boundaries. Our economy doesn't function by jurisdictional boundaries. And the more that we can do on a regional basis to strategize long-term, but also react in a coordinated way to what's coming, will make all the difference in the world about how we're able to recover. And that goes from everything from our public health experts being able to coordinate across jurisdictional lines, to our political folks, to our business community. We have to function in very robust regional ways for us to be successful. It goes for education as well. And Dr. Bedell is engaged in conversations, I know, with superintendents throughout the region. That kind of thinking and strategizing for the long term, but reacting quickly in a coordinated way on a regional basis, I think will be very critical for the way that we sort of emerge from the virus and getting back to work.
Dr. Bedell, have you envisioned, game planned what education is going to look like? How different the 2020 to 2021 school year will look for your students?
Yeah, I have. And actually, I have a meeting scheduled with every single one of our building principals today around 1:30 to talk to them about my thoughts on what next year will look like. The biggest thing that I have shared with our team is I want to be on the right side of history when this is all said and done. Did we make the right decisions to advance education in a way that it, in essence, works for all kids? And in my opinion, the way that the current system is designed, and when you look at our data and you look at our data over decades, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work for the masses that we have to serve in this city. And I think we have an opportunity here to be bold. There's a lot of room for grace and understanding. And even as I tell my team, when we think about digital conversion, I don't want us to talk about a response to COVID-19 because the truth is there's a lot of things. We've been a one-to-one district as far as devices are concerned since 2015, yet we never engaged in the proper digital conversions. So what does that look like for HR? What does that look like from a curriculum standpoint? What does it look like for policy? how do you convert those in a way where in a digital world, everybody understands that the system can continue to operate and it's not solely dependent on this chalkboard era of how we conduct teaching and learning. Because the chalkboard era has become extremely irrelevant for a number of kids in this country, not just in the urban school district sector, but it also then requires that we have to understand as a system that 15,000 students potentially in our facilities may not be possible for the foreseeable future. And how do you practice social distancing on school buses? And what does that look like then in classrooms from a class size standpoint? And so as a system, we have to be prepared to also realize that there are a number of families that got a taste of what this virtual education aspect looks like. And there's going to be a number of families who are going to say, I don't think I want to send my kid back. I like this and I want to be able to do this from home, but I still want to be able to access the social and the emotional aspects of development. So making sure that my kids get to participate in clubs, making sure that they get to participate in athletics and those kind of things. We got to be ready for all of that. That's the conversation I'm having with my principals later. Like this, it will never look the same when this is all said and done. It will never look the same. And if all we're trying to do right now is just get through it and survive, and then we go back, we will be completely irrelevant post-COVID-19.
Along those same lines, I want to kick this one to Dr. Hawkinson. Is it safe or responsible for the parents who want to send their kids to daycare? Is it safe and responsible for people to be able to go back when the Chiefs kick off in the fall? I think that that's where a lot of people's minds are right now.
Yeah.
They understand social distancing. They understand personal responsibility. They understand how important it is to do their part to slow the spread of this virus.
Mm-hmm.
But there are certain things that folks are, really tied to. So how safe is it to resume some of those things once the stay-at-home orders are lifted at the state level and local level?
Yeah, I mean, everybody wants to go to the restaurants and go to the Chiefs and see the Royals and see sporting. People need childcare, and childcare centers have to open up because people do have to work. How safe is it right now? I would say it's not safe. But again, moving forward, I don't know how safe it's going to be because we know we have such a small percentage of the population infected. Again, we know it spreads so easily. There are probably going to be half of the population or more infected in the United States, and that's here in this area too. When will that happen, and at what rate, and at what speed or velocity will we see that happen? And will those numbers then flood the hospitals around the region, flood the ICUs? I don't have a good answer for, is it safe? Right now, it's not safe, but that's why we need to do the opening. And the stay-at-home orders are coming off, and do these things in a thoughtful, meticulous manner, because we have to take all of these details into consideration of, number one, the medical safety, number two, the economics of it, three, other just childcare and family care and social gathering types of things. We need to take all of those things into account. I would say no, right now it's not safe to do those types of things. But moving forward, we need to put out a plan to be able to do them. It's just, we don't know the best way to go about doing that at this point.
Joe, what have you seen? I know Dr. Bedell touched on some of the innovation, some of the forward thinking that's happening from the educational field, but in the business community, what have you seen from an innovation standpoint that's going to be critical as this region, as our area begins to rebound?
Yeah, what I'm really excited about relative to this is that there in the Midwest, we're sort of used to this. Well, there's got to be a best practice somewhere that we can just adopt here and make it work. There are no best practices here. We're in uncharted territory. And so what you're seeing is a lot of great innovation and creativity and what you would expect from Kansas City businesses going out and meeting needs. So, Jay Rieger transferring all of their work from great distilled liquors to the kinds of hand wash that not only the hospitals will need, but all of our businesses will need as we start to reopen. Really critical. We have other companies that have gone to making personal protective masks. They might not be the masks that a hospital can deploy, but they certainly will be the kind of masks that every business will need to feel safe in reopening and making sure they're providing their folks with what they need. We've seen other companies in the region that are making the protective shields that hospital and frontline workers need. So that innovation and creativity is going on every single day in Kansas City. And I guess what I would say is, I think we're just at the beginning of that. I think we're just at the beginning of understanding what will emerge. As Dr. Bedell said, everything has changed. And I think that Kansas City has a chance here to really not look for somebody's best practice, but to be bold enough to go to a next place and to do that in a way that's supportive of one another, which I think is just baked in to who we are in Kansas City. I don't know how everybody else feels, but boy, being home this long, I now realize how social we are as creatures. We want to be with one another, right? And this is painful. It hurts all of us. And I know so many of us are frustrated, and we want it all to change. But the best thing we can do for one another is be smart, lift one another up, listen to the great advice of Dr. Hawkinson and others, and be smart about the next steps we take, and then be as safe as we possibly can. I think that's Kansas City in itself. We know how to get along, to work together, to get to a place, and we're all going to be called on to do that in short order, while still being innovative and challenging one another about what should we be doing, where should we be going. So I think there's going to be it's going to be a tough road to hoe, but there's opportunities here that collectively we can come to that will be good for all of us and for our kids too.
You know, you're in the Midwest when we talking about a tough road to hoe. I know exactly where you're at, though. Ms. Myers, one of the things you expressed as we kicked this off was we really want clear guidance, right? Everyone wants kind of this, okay, here's the starting line, let's go out of the gate. How are you forecasting what that looks like, and how business owners can do exactly what Joe is talking about, open up safely and responsibly, where they can protect not only their employees, but their customers?
I think the community is listening to its health providers and business owners and leaders and trying to understand what they can do. I think there's a very deep, deep responsibility that people feel toward their employees and toward their customers. And so I think people will work hard to make a thoughtful decision about how they open and don't open. But also to pick up on something that Joe said in the question that you asked, our small business owners are the most entrepreneurial people in the world, right? And they are going to do amazing things to react and adapt to the situation that they find themselves in. So we've watched a lot of restaurants go to curbside to go very rapidly, for instance, as opposed to just sitting there and saying, oh, well, I don't know what to do. So they're going to move forward and come up with creative ideas on how to do social distancing and how to make things happen. So I think we'll see a lot of really interesting and creative ways that people come forward with to do social distancing, to still service the customer. I think that what we're seeing right now is the weaknesses that exist, the opportunities for problem solving that exist in our environment. Think of the entrepreneurial things that we're talking about here. Let's get a Wi-Fi bus and put it in a neighborhood to fix that problem. And so we're going to see lots and lots of those kinds of things happen. We're also going to see some great businesses grow out of this. Somebody's going to find a great way to make something happen. We've already got small businesses here helping college students do virtual career fairs. We have businesses here that are helping to figure out how you can sense COVID in the air. We have so many businesses here that are already working on these big problems that are coming along. So it is going to be a difficult but fairly exciting place to be as we watch how people take advantage of the problems and move them forward. And so I think it's going to be a crowdsourcing of the ways that people figure out to come out of this safely. But I feel like there's a deep, deep, deep want to keep people safe. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Ruben, how do we make sure that traditionally and historically disenfranchised groups and business owners and community partners don't get left behind in that innovation?
Yeah, that's a big question and a big challenge. I think it's just going to go back to, again, just how we approach economic development, community development in a very intentional way, in a very kind of targeted, tactical way. There are considerable just disparities that exist, not just with small businesses, access to capital, but education, health, technology, and I think our government leaders, our local government leaders, need to also be as entrepreneurial as the rest of our community that we talk about, the small businesses, and really kind of take some leadership on coming up with some solutions here. We're asking a lot of our community to just react and respond. But I think there's things that we can do as a city from just a solutions perspective and a policy perspective here locally. We've got a lot of stakeholders in this community that I think can bring together different expertise, resources to do that. But we need to kind of unleash that a little bit here. And but I think as far as connecting a lot of our community. Both economically, socially, all of that. I think it's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take, again, some very very intentional, specific focus on the communities that have historically been underserved, under-resourced, underinvested. Our city has taken a lot of big bets on a lot of big economic development projects. Some have turned out good. Some, I think there's still a lot of questions and about how they're kind of benefiting our community as a whole. But we really need to focus on, I think, the communities that have not received the level of attention, resources that other parts of our community have, for sure.
Well, we've got just a few minutes left, and I wanted to make sure that each of you got the opportunity to share kind of your final thoughts. So I'm going to pose this question to the entire group, and we'll start with Ms. Myers. What are the biggest needs you see? What are the biggest things that we as a community are missing right now? And what would you like for us to do in response collectively?
I think that what this is going to take to come through this is cross-sector collaboration between health, business, education. This is our opportunity to shine. This is our opportunity to take an underlying capacity that we have in our region to be collaborative, because we are way more collaborative than many other places, and really take that and bring it all together to solve the issues that are going to come in front of us. So I think it's going to be important to collaborate cross-sector, cross-industry, make sure that we're bringing in all of the communities that may have been left out in the past and bring it together and move forward together.
Mr. Zacharias?
I think that's exactly right. Rita did a good job of that. I think the thing we should remember is that there's another sector here we've not talked about, and that's government. Let's remember that the local governments in this region have been decimated on the revenue side. Sales tax revenues have been down. Property tax values, I think, may indeed go down as well. And they are the infrastructure that makes a community whole. So I think we have to remember that aspect as well. And I think we need to be innovative. I think, as Ruben was saying before, about how to go ahead and help society in its broad way to kind of make those things together. And I think local governments are up to the challenge to do that. And I think we need to be creative in terms of how we do revenue generation. We are hindered by what the states tell us we can and cannot do. And I think this is a great opportunity, as Joe said before, to invent the future for ourselves. I do want to end with this. I am tremendously optimistic that we're going to come and rise to this challenge. And I think this is a way we can reinvent ourselves and handle, I think, and deal with some of the social ills and injustices, I'll use that strong term, that have been with us for decades. And we should seize this opportunity through collaborative involvement for the entire community. And I'm excited about it.
Ruben?
Yeah, I'm optimistic. If we recognize and acknowledge again those disparities, we got to support parts of our community that are being left out. We got to support Dr. Bedell and our public schools. There's a whole segment of our population that's not getting the same access to educational services, to resources. There's a whole segment of our population that doesn't have the ability to thrive economically. I'm a big believer in economic empowerment through entrepreneurship. Obviously, we support small businesses. We need to support more minority-owned small businesses, and for us, that's giving them more access to capital. We hopefully through this effort with our relief loan fund, we can demonstrate and show that there is a way to do that. And I really hope we don't lose the opportunity to kind of see how this crisis has really kind of highlighted where we have a lot of gaps to do better.
Dr. Bedell?
So I've heard a lot of great, inspiring comments from many of the people here today. And that gives me hope in itself. And one of the things I was fortunate to do last week, and I know Kelly is on, my communications person, I had an opportunity to speak on a equity now in the midst of COVID-19. And it was on a Discovery Ed platform with about 44 states that were represented. And one of the things I shared with them is what I hope will happen on the other side of this is that we are able to dismantle a system that's by design not working for everyone. And I shared with them these 5 pieces. Structural racism in Kansas City. It's a YouTube video. It's 13 minutes, 8 seconds. Very powerful, done by a couple of educators from Wichita State, I believe. Then I shared with them Racism in Kansas City, a short history. And then the book Complex Justice, that's on the school district. And then Race, Real Estate, and Uneven Development, the Kansas City Experience from 1900 to 2010. And then A City Divided. And the thing that I said is that we have an opportunity to unpack and undo some of the tenets, in my opinion, around structural racism that has created this significant divide in this city, and to come out better as a city as a whole. And when I hear comments around, thinking about what the Wi-Fi access looks like for a community as a whole, there's a tremendous amount of money here in Kansas City. And if we stop just trying to piecemeal things and say, we're going to take 1 or 2 big rocks and we're going to put all of that money in there, and we're going to try to make it more of a level playing field for everybody, that's when we begin to build a Kansas City that is truly great for all, but a Kansas City that will start attracting businesses and families at a rate that's unprecedented. But it's incumbent upon all of us to say, we're going to do this because it's the right thing to do.
Mr. Reardon?
3 things I think I'd mention, and everything that everyone said is I totally agree with. The first 2 are pragmatic and right now. The first is the federal government has to continue to do additional rounds of stimulus to keep small business alive, to support local governments if we want to emerge from this and have an economy that's truly going to function where we can do what we need to do. That's essential. It needs to continue. It has to be bipartisan. The second thing that has to happen is we need the practical information that businesses of all sizes will need to be as safe as they can for their employees and for their customers. I know there are a lot of folks working on this throughout Kansas City. We're working with the Mid-American Regional Council and others on some guidelines to think about as you start to reopen. That's very important. The third is right back to what Dr. Bedell mentioned in his closing remarks, but earlier, which is we're at a moment in time because of what's going on where we can't have it be acceptable to say this is the way it's always been, or that that's the way we've always done it. And if we don't take advantage of what's going on today to really challenge what we've got in front of us, to take new innovative steps to address issues that we've known about for a long time that are revealing themselves in new ways, then we will have missed a real opportunity for Kansas City. And I think that that's the hope for our future is I think there's a lot of energy around saying, how can we as a region really take our place, Kansas City, to the next level in the midst of what is a crisis? That's the opportunity I think that sits out there for all of us.
All right, and then we're going to give the final word to Dr. Dana Hawkinson.
I thank you. Yes. So when and if our restrictions ease and we are opened up, it's going to boil down to individual responsibility and vigilance. And there's things that you can do. Go out only if you need to. Don't go out if you're sick or ill. Cough into your elbow. Wash your hands frequently or use hand sanitizer. And most importantly, do not touch your face, whether you're wearing a mask or not. If you do those things, your chance of getting this infection will largely decrease or exponentially decrease. And that will protect you from getting sick and getting your loved ones sick. And I think that is the main message when and if these restrictions ease up.
To our fantastic panel, especially you, Dr. Hawkinson, thank you for the work that you guys are doing on the front lines in healthcare to keep us all safe and get our community back together. Let me thank all of our panelists, this fantastic and esteemed group. Your expertise is appreciated. I know not just by us at 41 Action News, but to all the people who are going to get to watch and experience this. Going forward, we can't say this enough. We're all in this together, truly. Mr. Reardon hit on this. We are all in this together. It doesn't matter what part of the city you live in, how you vote, kids, no kids, we are all in this together. And so 41 Action News wants to help get people back on their feet on the road to recovery. And the Rebound Kansas City is going to be available only on 41 Action News, kshb.com, and on your favorite streaming device.